economic mess awaiting Pakistan's new leader to take the thrill out of his election victory. The country's current account deficit, a broad measure of the imbalance between imports and exports, has soared to an alarming $18 billion. Foreign currency reserves would cover less than 2 months of imports. The Pakistani rupee is shaky. Tax collection is scandalously low last year. In a country of 200 million, fewer than 1 million people paid any taxes, and Pakistan was recently returned to an international grey list for failing to curb terrorism financing, making foreign transactions more complicated and expensive. So what's the new Prime Minister to do? Imran Khan, the former cricket player whose political party won Pakistan's disputed election late last month, vowed to tackle the distressed economy the moment he ascends to the premiership, which is expected to happen in the coming days. But the task will be made more difficult because Pakistan has sandwiched itself between two financial powers, China, from which it has borrowed heavily, and the Western-dominated International Monetary Fund, which might be a short-term savior. Pakistan has taken out billions in Chinese loans and run out the huge import town bringing in bulldozers, train, carriages and building materials as part of the Chinese-funded master plan to revamp its ports, roads and railways. That $62 billion plan, known as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, has been celebrated by both countries as a long-term investment that will increase trade. It is a cornerstone of a global infrastructure initiative that China calls Belt and Road. Economists agree that for Pakistan's economy to develop beyond rice and textiles, its main exports, it needs new infrastructure, a lot of it. But in the meantime, the Chinese plan is pushing Pakistan's deficit to unsustainable levels. The country's debt is rising rapidly and it is running out of hard currency to pay its bills. Pakistani economists say that Mr. Khan's team will have no choice but to beg the monetary fund for a multi-billion-dollar bailout, one of more than a dozen that Pakistan has received since the late 1980s. That prospect doesn't make the United States super happy. Make no mistake, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said this week, "We will be watching what the IMF does, Mr." Pompeo objected to the idea of money from the fund being used by Pakistan to pay back Chinese loans. There's no rationale for IMF. Tax dollars, and associated with that American dollars that are part of the IMF funding, for those to go to bail out Chinese bondholders of China itself, he said. Pakistan's economy, it seems, has become yet another battlefield between the United States and China. As the largest contributor to the fund, the United States has considerable sway over its decisions. And though the United States and Pakistan enjoyed close ties during the Cold War, the relationship has soured. President Trump froze aid to Pakistan at the beginning of the year, citing frustration with its tolerance of extremist groups that operate within its borders. Though China is a member of the Monetary Fund and one of its biggest contributors, it has a different philosophy when making its own loans. Getting paid back is not its only, or maybe even primary, goal. As it seeks new markets for its construction companies and new pathways to ship its goods, China is financing ambitious infrastructure projects across Central and South Asia. Beijing also views these projects as a way to project its power and secure allies. The goal of the Monetary Fund, by contrast, is to stabilize distressed economies and help countries avoid unsustainable financial imbalances. It structures loans with strict conditions to increase the chances the country will clean up its finances and be able to pay back its loans. While Chinese loans don't have the same strings attached, they still have strings. In Pakistan, much of the profit from new power plants and roads goes straight back to Chinese companies. And as China showed in Sri Lanka, it can be a hard-knuckle debt collector. When Sri Lanka couldn't pay back the money it had borrowed, China snatched one of its biggest stores. Pakistan is clearly falling to the China side, said Sean Fenner, lead Asia economist for Oxford Economics, a global research firm. Even with a bailout from the Monetary Fund, she added, I don't see that changing.